Hi, it's me, MC. I come every week to talk about everything about aging and health and wellness so that we can be as functional and as healthy and thriving into our much older years. And today, because I'm on this health journey of losing weight and I've talked about triggers, I've talked about ghost fat. So I kind of want to talk a little more about triggers because I'm realizing that instead of looking at certain things in a positive framework, I've been looking at them in a negative framework. So think about subscribing. I'd love to see you here every week, joining me in this discussion and exploration and curiosity about our health and wellness as we get older. So please push that like button, push that subscribe button, push the thumb up, share. I would love to see you here each week. So again, let's talk about triggers. And I think many of us suffer from triggers, but we really don't realize it until something's happened and we've had a new word that I've learned called a crash out. I had no idea what a crash out was until I was listening to this minister talk about it in one of his sermons. And am realizing that this is this emotional state that happens where you're just out of control. And our new young people are calling it a crash out. And typically this happens when you've been triggered. So, what is a trigger? A trigger is anything, an event, a person, a smell, a comment. Sometimes it's a memory or a feeling that somehow it just sparks some very strong reaction from you that's really not about what's actually happening, but it's some kind of feeling that brings you back into an old memory or old pattern or old response. Does that sound familiar? So this is something that it took me a long time to realize because I'm one of those people, if I'm triggered, I typically shut down. I dissociate. I stop feeling. I stop sensing. So it took me a while to get in touch with that because it was not my process to overreact or to act out or lash out controllably. I've got a couple of circumstances where this happened and it was really crazy. One was about a taxi cab that got too close to me when I was crossing the street. And for some reason that triggered me. And I hit the taxi cab with my umbrella, telling them to back the F up because it felt very scary. I'm not sure why that scared me so much, but it definitely triggered me. And I'm not someone who loses my temper or goes out of control. But I guess sometimes if things come too close to me physically, it makes me feel uncomfortable. And that's somewhat of a trigger, especially if it's unexpected. I think other triggers when it relates to our body is this issue of someone commenting on your body, or if you see a food you used to overeat with, or sometimes it's a stressful day at work, or some old photo that you've seen, or for me, sometimes it can be a smell or being around people who see things negatively and complain a lot and just aren't really positive, or they're focusing on things that don't inspire or motivate or make you move on. Sometimes that can be a trigger. And so you have to really figure out why that's triggering you. First of all, is it a trigger? That's the key. Is why is it? And it can feel very personal when you think about it because sometimes it'll come from nowhere. One minute you're doing great, then all of a sudden it's like something's crashing on your head. I think that's why they call it a crash out. And you feel like you just are out of control. You're spiraling. You've lost your temper. You're acting bananas. You're acting ridiculous. And suddenly you feel like you're not fine. And I think that's why feeling triggered is something that happens. And I think we all have experiences when this is going on. And just because you've been triggered doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means we're all human. This happens. We get triggered by things. Sometimes it's things we haven't resolved yet, or maybe it's even things we have resolved and we're still working on it, or we're trying to figure out ways of dealing with these feelings and emotions that show up differently. So, what are some ways that show up when you're on a health journey? Sometimes it's that expectation of where you think you are even though you're doing everything you want and you're fearful and the scale isn't moving and you feel frustrated and you've been tracking, you've been doing all these things. And the truthful is that it's a complicated issue, our weight and our bodies. So we're not always going to see a number. We're not always going to see a movement of pounds, but we might see things that are differently. And this is what I'm really learning this week is that instead of looking for things that used to reassure me about how I was feeling in my body, I'm now looking for and being curious about things that are new about how my body's feeling, especially when it comes to wearing clothes. How is this clothes feeling in my body? How do I feel? Instead of thinking this feels too loose or scary or I don't feel I'm attractive in it, why not look at is it something that complements me? Is this something that makes me feel good? The fabric or the fit or the style? I think sometimes it's about changing our frame of reference. Often, if you've been overweight for many years, like me, you feel like everything is about looking at the negative versus looking at how you can be curious about how you are changing, even though it may feel uncomfortable. It still is a possibility that you are really making progress. I think also, too, looking on social media, sometimes many of the people who have these before and after pictures, and it can make me feel like I'm just not doing as well in my progress. But again, comparison never gets us anywhere. And that can be a trauma or a trigger, or it just can be difficult. So we also can deal with past traumas or habits where sometimes it was a habit to eat the whole container of ice cream if we were dealing with something that was a trauma, or it was upsetting, or it was depressing, or difficult, or frustrating. And that can be something that we have to really work through. Instead of eating a whole container of ice cream, we have to figure out, like, why am I feeling this way to want to eat that whole container of ice cream? Maybe I can uncover other feelings and see how I can soothe myself in another way. I know for me, I bought a fuzzy blanket. And sometimes when I feel a little upset or down or frustrated, I put the fuzzy blanket around me or I hold the fuzzy blanket. And it's certainly very soothing. And it's a better choice than eating a whole container of ice cream. Also, too, it's hard to know who to be safe around, who supports you in your goals, in your health journey. So, someone who just encourages you to have dessert or encourages to skip the gym and come with me on a going to lunch or dinner, or instead of taking a walk, how about we just go have some coffee and sit down or something else? In other words, your plan has been somehow diverted by a friend. And I think in those situations, you have to think about what's the most important thing. Maybe this is your friend's way of asking for support. I think the other thing is you have to figure out how much do I need support right now? And maybe choosing you over maybe what your friend needs is maybe the right thing to do in the moment. Difficult decisions, every situation is specific. And I think we all have to figure out what works for us. So, how do we show up for ourselves when we do get triggered? In the past, again, I shut down. But now I'm working really hard to stay present and doing a mindfulness practice, like breathing and feeling my feet against the floor, my butt against the chair. These types of things can bring you into the present moment. And you can ask yourself, what is causing me to feel so uncomfortable right now? And sometimes it helps you name what the trigger is. Maybe it's someone brought some favorite food of yours that you binged on for work. And so, how can you help yourself? Maybe the fact is that you need to know a plan if something happens. Make a plan ahead of time. I know for me, I've made a plan where I will, if someone's brought something that I enjoy, this happened last week, in fact. Someone was celebrating this research administration day and they brought these little teeny miniature cupcakes. They were very decadent. And something, I just enjoyed them. This was a great way for her to show appreciation. I enjoyed them. I had them. I incorporated them into my daily calorie count that day. And it was so funny. I made the choice for my lunch to be less a protein drink plus these two miniature cupcakes. And sure, is this something that I felt a little triggered by? No, not really, because I've already made a plan that when people show up with food that I find hard to resist, I can make a choice. I can make a choice to fully enjoy it and incorporate it into my diet or my calorie count that day, not my diet. It's not a diet, it's a food plan, it's a life plan. That's what I'm really working on. How about you? I'm working on a life plan because we can't control everything every day. And I don't want to live a life so restricted that I can't enjoy a sweet treat, partially even. But if I had felt like I wanted to, I would have eaten half because sometimes that's what I've done, taken half of something and enjoyed it fully. And that way I don't feel deprived because I think in the past, when I was around people and there was always that thing where I would not participate. I would not eat anything in front of people. So that was always a weird behavior of mine of not eating and not being part of the social dynamic. Now I see it as a way of being a choice that I can make. I can make a choice to not participate if I don't want to. Maybe there's something I'm planning for dinner that's decadent and rich, and that's where I really would rather enjoy myself versus this impromptu moment with colleagues or friends. I think we have to make a plan for those things we know that can trigger. Now, granted, if something happens and you capitulate, which happens, I've had it. I think there was like a series of weekends where I couldn't resist eating the whole 12 ounces of the frozen tart yogurt ice cream. It was like, okay, I can't face it. So you have to really embrace yourself and embrace your humanness. I know I am. I said, instead of saying I screwed up or I messed up, I just say, you know what? I'm learning to figure this out. I know that I can reframe this and make a change, but I'm still working through it and working to figure it out. So, this is why people who have long term resilience know that we can't get rid of all of our triggers or the things that are going to make us feel vulnerable and we have to defend ourselves or we feel like it's out of control when this happens. We really need to recognize, oh, gosh, that's that trigger of mine. And sometimes we're capable of managing it and recognizing I can choose differently. Or as Gabby Bernstein says, choose again. I like that choice. And basically, it's a process of growth and healing because whatever is triggering you, it was created in a very vulnerable place where you didn't feel safe and you did something that maybe you helped yourself in that moment to feel safer. So that's really why we have to realize that long-term resilience is key. So if you've felt triggered lately, you're not alone. I see you. I know that you're whole and there's nothing wrong with you at all. We know that triggers are a part of our process. And every time you face one, guess what? We're getting stronger and we're getting more knowledgeable about who we are as people and how we can be the healthiest version of ourselves as we get older. And that's really truthfully the key. I hope that me talking about triggers hasn't triggered you. I'm really sorry if it did, but I know that if it is, then maybe it's something you need to think about as I'm thinking about it for myself. I recognized that I was looking more willingly at the negative elements instead of showing up with curiosity about, oh, I really did feel confident feeling this new piece of clothing on me. Or I really did feel confident in how strong my legs felt when I stood from a squat. I was really amazed. And why can't I make it more about reveling and rejoicing in the things I know I'm accomplishing versus those things that are old thoughts, old beliefs I'm willing to let go of now? What are you willing to let go of? What are you opening yourself up so that you can have an older person that would be vibrant, functional into your 70s and 80s, because daily you're doing something just like me, doing some small step adds up over time. I think I'm finding this remarkable, frankly, and I hope you are too. So think about subscribing. I hope you'll join me here each week and share. Is there something that triggers you, or are you still discovering things that maybe triggered you or triggering you? We suffer from this in many ways. But what's wonderful is to have a plan, to make a decision of what you want to do when these things happen versus just crashing out and flying off the handle of being out of control. You could have thought about it ahead of time, or journal about it, or pray about it, whatever it is that will help you figure out how to support yourself to move forward in the most beautiful and honorable way of your beautiful self that's going to grow older with health and wellness. Join me here every week. This is MC of Healthy by George. Bye-bye.
So thank you so much for joining me at Healthy by George. I hope you found the information inspiring and that it encourages you on your wellness journey. Because remember, your body, your well-being are a most precious gift, and every tiny action taken daily can make a huge difference. I hope the information here is educational purposes and is not meant to replace your medical care. See your doctor and talk about what works for you. If you enjoyed today's content, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me continuing creating content that inspires and empowers you to live your best life. Goodbye for now, and join me again at the next Healthy by George.